What's going on YouTube? Warstorm here, coming at you guys in another video. I know it's been a pretty dang long time since I've been uploading on the channel, but it's mostly because I just haven't been playing Yu-Gi-Oh quite as much. Between the coronavirus pandemic preventing, me from going to locals again until recently to actually play test, and between honestly, since Rising Rampage, I've had very little interest in the sets coming out. Rising Rampage and majority of the sets coming out after it just either had some super duper expensive staples, and on top of that just didn't have a lot of interesting cards for me. I've basically been playing the same 3 to 4 decks for the past few years, and between that and the ban list, banning Electromite and, Servant getting hit, I just was starting to lose interest in the game. But I recently was finally able to make a trip to locals again to do some play testing, kind of get back in the groove of things. The master rule changes also were a big thing for me because there were decks like DDD that I have not been able to really play at all in the past few years. Basically, DDDs were basically left on the legs of other powerful generic cards to even function. But now they're relatively usable again, and yes, there will be a DDD deck profile, but I decided to do this one first. So this is a updated version of kind of my Pendulum Magicians, but it's not necessarily exactly the kind of list you guys think. It is 50 cards, and it is incorporating a ton of different engines, but the main reason this deck was shelved earlier in the year was because Droll and Lockbird was being main decked, and this card deck has a lot of searching. And with Electromite banned, it really took a lot of testing for me to figure out how to make the deck. But anyways, well, out of the way, we'll go ahead and get to deck profile. That's what you're here for. Start us off for the Magician packages. Actually, it's probably the smallest Magician package I've played in a long time. 3 Harmonizing, 1 Black Fang, and 2 Purple Poison. So in the previous build I was playing Dragon Caller, but I have cut the Guard Dragon package from the deck completely because of the banning of Destrudo. So this is how the deck looks. I haven't really found an adequate replacement for Destrudo yet. But anyways, the core of this engine is getting your Harmonizing Magician off and summoning one of these from your deck. You don't want to, because you have other things in the Pendulum though, things like Oath Dragon, Wisdom Eye just are not very good. You're going to have things like Sephiroth, Magical Abductor, other things are going to be in your need to be in the Pendulum zone, so you can't really have magicians. You can't really have magicians in the scale that much. So that's why the package is so small. You could theoretically maybe bump in like a Dragon Pit if you feel like you need back row removal. And maybe a level 7, a special summon off a Harmonizing, so you can make your Absolute Dragon. Personally, I find that this has been a pretty good ratio, but there are rooms to be negotiated. You could play another level 7 instead of the second Purple Poison. Really up to you. And for the Zephyr package for the deck, this is a Zephyr engine. It's a pretty common one. It's 3 Sephiroth, 2 Secret, 1 Wendy, and 1 Thuban. So the reason I like the Zephyr engine so much is not only does it offer you a searchable counter trap, but on top of that, it gives you spells so you can pop off a majority of your effects. Things like Magical Abductor and your Endymion cards all need spells to proc them off, and that's where the Zephyr package comes in. 1 Zephyr Providence will get you to 3 spells, which will get you a search from your Abductor or a effect of one of your Endymion monsters. It's really strong, and being able to get those extra spells in the rotation is just great. This is a pretty good ratio. It's been tested on a few different competitive lists that I've seen, and I really like it. It's just compact enough, and it gives you room to maybe side out some cards when you go into post-siding, like these two, for example. It's a really solid engine. I really like it a lot. You could theoretically play a Treasure of the Yangtze over Thuban, because Chao Feng is pretty good against the Adamantimators because it will prevent Earth monster effects from activating. Really, it's up to you, but usually you're going to have both this and Treasure up, so it's not always the most consistent thing, but it's something. If you definitely feel like you like to play that, you definitely can replace Thuban with Treasure of the Yangtze. Then mentioned earlier, which is the 3 copies of Magical Abductor. This card has gotten pretty much necessary, I think, since Electromite was banned. It's a pretty solid monster. Being able to search any Pendulum monster off of 3 spells are activated is pretty good. Its monster effect can search things like Droll and Lockbird and Effect Failure, post-siding, I guess. But mainly you're going to be using its Pendulum effect to search out your Magician cards. Pretty solid card. Then for the Endymion package, I have the 1 Servant and the 2 Magister of Endymion, along with the 3 of our boss monster here, our Mighty Master Magic. It's really, this guy is mainly what you're kind of build. I've seen a lot of the OCG lists are basically built around turboing this multiples of this guy out, and that's why he's in here at 3. You have a pretty good likelihood of seeing it that way. It's also a cool level 7, so you can overlay it for your Absolute Dragon and then link it off. And it's not that big of a deal because Selene here can bring it back if it does hit the graveyard. It's a really powerful boss monster. Magister works really well with both this and Jackal. If they do end up in the extra deck, you have to Pendulum summon this out to make a play. You can simply use Magister to link it off. Its monster effect also allows you to grab to remove any 3 spell counters on your opponent's turn to special summon out a monster that can have spell counters on it, so it's pretty solid as well. Gives you another way to get your Endymion monsters out. And Servant, obviously it is limited, but it is still a really strong card to have in your deck. Then we're kind of getting generic Pendulum engines now. 3 Chronograph Sorcerer, 3 Time Gazers, 3 Curtain Raisers. Curtain Raiser was something I've always neglected to play, but now it's back in the list because it moves itself out of the Pendulum zone, which essentially makes it a free counter for both your Endymion as well as your Abductor. And it's level 4. Level 4 plays are a little bit more relevant because it prevents grave effects, which against things like Eldritch, things like Adamancipators have a fair amount of things that activate in graves, such as Black Dragon, being able, and of course Salamangreats as well. Being able to have an additional level 4 body to Pendulum summon to make those Abyss Dweller play is pretty nice. Chronograph Sorcerer is really good for making, it makes, Selene here a lot easier to make. As long as you have access to this and 2 other monsters, you can go into your Selene, and Selene is obviously a really good card. And Time Gazer is also, it's actually kind of relevant for if you do want to summon a level 7 Synchro with your Harmonizing, you can get it out of the deck as well. Then we have 3 copies of Master Cerberus along with the 2 Jackals and the 1 Garuda. I still feel like I like having Garuda in here, simply put, because it is an out to back row. Being able to have a searchable out to back row is great. The main reason I have gone back and forth on Cerberus is whether people are main decking Ash Blossom or not, because there are very few ways you can get it out of your Pendulum zone. It has a very bad scale. So if you really want to Pendulum summon, you have to put something else in the scale, and then you can't use its effect. So I personally go back and forth on it, but I like having it in here now. Ash Blossom isn't really seeing main deck play right now, so it's back in. Jackal King is obviously a great negation, and it works really well with Endymion cards. As we mentioned, Garuda is great for back row removal. And that's it for the monsters. Now we're moving on to the spells, which there are a fair amount. 3 Oracle Zephyra, 3 Zephyr Providence, 4 our Zephyrus engine. This is one of the reasons, like I said, why I really like the Zephyr package in the deck. It's super consistent spell counters to get on your cards, so it's obviously pretty darn good, and it's great searching for consistency for your deck. Then we have 3, then for more search cards, with 3 Pendulum Calls, along with the 3 Spell Power Mastery for our last 6 spells. I personally find that this 3 Pendulum Calls, it obviously searches out your Harmonizing and another Magician, which is fantastic, and Mastery works really well. It's 3 more virtual copies of any of your Endymion cards, and if you have an Endymion in hand, it puts counters on it, an extra free counter on it. So pretty strong cards, really like them. They're pretty dang good. Then for the traps, of course, we have the 1 Zephyr Dying Strike, the 1 Zephyr War. Again, War is searchable outs to annoying stuff such as Mystic Mine and other back rows. It is a little slow unless you do have, because it cannot be activated from hand unless you have 2 Zephyrs in scale. So it can be a little bit slow, but having that searchable removal is still pretty darn good. Divine Strike is a great counter trap for stopping things like Dark Ruler no more that people are main decking right now. Now we're moving on to the extra deck. We have the one copy of Selene. Selene is an absolute boon for the deck. It really helps the Endymion package to function better. If you're unfamiliar with what it does, when she's link summoned, she gets spell counters on her equal to the number of spells on the field and in the grave. That counts cards in the Pendulum zone, as well as your field spells. So if you have, say, Oracle and 2 cards in your Pendulum zone, that's automatic 3 counters, plus any counters in grave, which a lot of your cards can use those counters that are on Selene to activate their effects. Things like Jackal, things like a Magister on the field can both activate their effects by, removing counters from her. Master Cerberus can as well. The only downside is that because it is an extra deck monster, you cannot use it for Mighty Master's effective bounce, because that requires you to bounce the card to hand, and it will not work because the card's not returning hands for the extra deck. So you cannot bounce this with Big Endymion, but as long as you have something else that has spell counters on it, you can proc its effect just fine. The main reason this effect you play it though is when it has a grave effect to attach 3 spell counters as quick effect to special summon 1 spellcaster monster from your hand or grave in defense position. So most of the time it's going to be your Big Endymion. If it's in the grave, or if it happens to be in your hand, you searched it out or something, you can go ahead and special summon on the opponent's turn. It will be in defense mode, and its defense is not as strong, but it is still a pretty darn good negation, and it can't be targeted, so it is, well, if they do run over it, you'll get a free spell. So personally, I find that Selene really helps the deck with a lot of plays. She enables it, and you've seen her in a lot of other decks as well. It's a really, really strong card. Then we have the one copy of Ciphering Lord Lambda. Lambda is your main generic link monster to go into. It's the most generic thing you really have now, with Electromite no longer in the picture. So it works really well to give you, if you just need a target for Savage Dragon, it just allows you to climb into it and put it in the grave so you can make your plays. Then we have one copy of Daybreaker. Daybreaker is a new addition to the extra deck. It does its requirement. It just kind of is a nice little climb into to get into Selene. I just like, and it's something I'm kind of testing in here. I do like having it in there, and it just can be some good removal going second, and it's just can be more free spell counters. Then we have another Link 3 in the form of one Draco Master the Tenyi. This is just a good generic Link monster. It's honestly a negotiable spot because I don't really have a lot of things to play. In the extra deck it's pretty open, so if you have something else you want to play, like maybe an access code talker or something like that, or something like Abramax, you can play that. And this instead is just a good generic Link monster. And we have our 2 Royal Dragons. Rollout can be pretty good against Eldritch because it gets rid of Golden Lord's kind of difficult, can be a little bit harder for the deck to get over sometimes. It is big at 3,500 if it's used as effect. And Boral Sword is just another way to end games. And then we still have the package of Absolute and Vortex Dragon. It is a little bit harder to summon because we don't have access. We're not playing that massive Guard Dragon engine with things like Tempest, so it's a little harder to summon, but it's still a great negation to have your extra deck, and I really like having it in here. Then for the rank 4s, I have Tornado Dragon has made a return along with Abyss Dweller. I really like Tornado Dragon. Simply, it's just another way for back row removal. Especially while it's not great against Eldritch because they will get their float effects. Getting rid of some back row is not necessarily a bad thing. And Abyss Dweller is obviously really strong. It's a lot of the meta matchups right now. We have one copy. Then for the synchros, we have one copy of Cyber Quantum Dragon, one copy of Ciphering Lord Omega, one Ignister, one Savage Dragon, and then for our last, we have one copy of Scarlight. Quantum Dragon is a pretty nice removal going second. Non-targeting removal is really nice, and it works really well with some of your things like Selene, being able to protect them from being run over. Selene doesn't exactly have a lot of attack, so it works really well with that. Omega is just an addition to the extra deck. I had the room, and I decided I wanted to play it again. It is a really strong synchro monster. It is a 1 for a reason. Ignister is a great card for removal going second. Being able to having that non-targeting removal, and obviously if you do ever run into another Pendulum deck, it's really strong in that as well. Savage Dragon, I understand it is very expensive, but it is a quintessential negate for the deck, and I personally find that I really, I don't know if the deck would even be viable without it. Scarlight is an addition simply because I do not like losing in time. As long as you have access to Harmonizing Magician, you can make this going into time, burn your opponent for 1,000, for game. You're going into time, so that's the main reason it's in here. It sucks. Time rules are the time rules. So anyway, guys, what do you guys think of this deck profile down in the comment section down below. And as always, I thank you guys for watching. It's Warstorm, signing out.